Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I missed you guys. Did you miss me? No? Okay. Well, I tell you what, you're going to have a wonderful next couple of weeks. Okay. But we need to make sure that we are focused, we're responsible, we're on task. Right now, you should have your highlighted word list out. Please take 1 minute and highlight the words here. We're going to be working with atoms over the next couple of weeks. So one key word here would be atom. Next, highlight electron, neutron, nucleus, orbital, proton, repel, and synthetic. Now, you can refer back to this list anytime if you need more time to do that. We will be introducing atoms today. Tomorrow we will extend our discussion on atoms. Thursday this week you will have a quiz instead of Wednesday because of our break. So, and I may actually continue with Thursday quizzes in the future instead of Wednesday. So I said may. I'm thinking about it. So make sure that you're up to date with this. It's online for a reason so that you guys can go there and make sure that you're up to date with that. I enlarged the words. Again, this week you have 8 words. Next week you will have a couple more. You will have a test probably next week over everything that we've talked about so far. And then the week after, we will have that last week and then Christmas break. So you really only have about 3 weeks until Christmas break. So just to re-explain what we were talking about on the announcements with Mr. White, make sure you're on your best behavior, you guys. It's critical that you guys come to school ready because we have 3 weeks and it's valuable time, okay? It's not break time until Christmas break, all right? So, on the other hand, you will have fun if you come to school with the right attitude, all right? All right, so I will be discussing this stuff in a lot of detail. So I will refer back to the highlighted word list as we go. If you need more time with the highlighted word list, I'll have it up here tomorrow for you as well. Today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about this concept of chemistry. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of chemistry before. Chemistry, only a couple of people. Basically, chemistry, it's the study of what they call atoms. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of an atom before. Good. Most people have probably heard of the word atom. An atom basically is a piece of matter that is a basic unit or a basic particle. If I take a piece of cheese, for example, and I cut the cheese and I keep cutting it over and over and over and over and over again until I cannot even really cut it again. I go get a sharp knife and then cut that little piece and then cut that little piece until it won't even cut anymore. Well, then I need to get a microscope and then cut that little piece. And believe it or not, they have done this. And they've tried to cut the little piece of matter down so tiny that they get to one single building block or one piece or particle of that substance. That is an atom. Now, atoms are made up of different things. Atoms are made up of subatomic particles. Okay? So, let me switch my slide over here real quick to my board. I'm going to kind of keep us on track here. And pardon my drawing, but I'll do my best. Originally, I wanted to use the airliner. This here is an airliner, which means that I could get up and I could float around and I could draw on the board up here. But unfortunately, I do not have that connected yet. That should be connected soon. Okay, so I'll just do it the old-fashioned way right here. Okay, so as you know, our topic today is atoms. And what are atoms? Well, it actually comes from a Greek word that means undivided. Undivided. Scientists at one time thought that that little particle could not be divided anymore. So remember when I cut that little piece of material all the way down to its final part? They thought that it could not be divided anymore. And that's why they named it that. They named it atoms. And this was like many, many years ago. Okay? And since then, different models came into existence where some people learned a little bit more about it and they added to it and they added to it. What they found out is that you can actually divide an atom. But what happens is that you get a very big reaction. It's called an atomic bomb that would go off. And that's why it takes that much energy to cut an atom. So in order to do that, it requires an enormous amount of heat and pressure to cut that atom. You can't just use a knife. You have to use something like atomic, nuclear. They call it nuclear. That's where it comes from. Okay, so atoms mean undivided, but we do know that they can't actually divide. Now, there's 3 different parts of an atom. Raise your hand if you know what the parts of an atom are. Okay, we highlighted some of them. Okay, so some people you're gonna learn this probably for your first time. You have what they call a nucleus, and the nucleus is the center part of the atom. Okay, so just to represent the nucleus, I'm just going to draw a couple of different particles in here. Okay, so just a couple of different circles in there. Okay, now this is the center of the atom. Now, in the center of the atom, there's these things called protons. Raise your hand if you've heard of a proton before. Okay, a couple of people. So a proton is in the nucleus of the atom. And a proton carries a positive charge. So I'm going to mark this as a positive charge. And then below it, I'm going to put positive charge. That's an important concept, okay? So I'm going to basically just draw a line to the purple part here. And we're going to call these purple ones protons, okay? Can you tell me what these other ones would be? Just based on what you know already? Is there anybody that can tell me what these other ones are called? These white, we'll just call it white ones. We'll label this a proton, and we'll label this white one something else. What do you think that white thing is? That is a neutron. That's a neutron. And neutrons do not carry any charge. Okay, so they're neutral. That's where that word neutral comes in. Okay, so neutron. And we would say it has no charge. Okay? Now, both of these things make up the nucleus. So I will maybe put this into a box, this part over here. And above it, or up on this line here, I'll write down nucleus. That way you remember all of these things in it. It represents the center of the atom. Nucleus. Now you're going to hear that word a lot, and you're going to hear it in other like life science when we talk about life science too, which would have a completely different meaning. Okay? But for now, you need to know that all matter's made up of atoms. Atoms are particles that are too small to be seen, not even with a microscope. It takes an electron microscope to even see it. They're so small it makes up everything, basically everything. Okay, so we know that on the inside of an atom that it would include the nucleus. The nucleus has these things called protons. They carry a positive charge, and I always remember the P stands for proton, and a P stands for positive. That's how I remember it. And then a neutron, no. I always remember no. No. And for me, that's how I remember it. Now, we're not done with the model yet, okay, because there's these things called electrons. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of an electron, okay? Quite a few people. An electron is kind of an important thing, and they're kind of weird too. I'll tell you why. First of all, they float around the nucleus in this thing called an orbital, or an electron cloud is what they call it. Now, there's these shells. They call them shells, okay, because it's kind of like a layer or a shell. And around the nucleus, you would have these electrons in these shells or in these orbitals. Now, if you imagine the solar system, for example, where we have, the sun and then the Earth's going around it, and then you have other planets going around it, this model is kind of like that. And I say kind of because electrons are very unpredictable. Okay? They're not going just in one way around the nucleus. You see, they jump around. Okay? And that's why they're kind of like a wavelength, or they just know that it's in there somewhere. They are so small that they're like tinier than the proton, a lot tinier. Okay, you see, they measure the proton and the neutron. They measure that with what they call an atomic mass unit, an AMU. Okay, now this AMU is very, very, very tiny. It's so tiny. But the electron is just a fraction, just a bitty fraction of an AMU. Okay? So that tells you something. There's not a whole lot of weight, so to speak, or mass with an electron. Okay? They almost do not even carry much mass. That's why they don't even use that when they measure it. They only use the nucleus when they're measuring the atom. Isn't that weird? So the electron's floating around this nucleus, and it's floating around in a path, kind of. It's in a shell. It's in a cloud. Okay? Now, sometimes they do go from one shell to another shell. Okay? Sometimes they do, but they never, ever go in between it. That's what's really super weird about an atom. They know. Like, I'm just going to draw like a circle here that would represent maybe the path of this set of atoms, okay? And then I'm going to draw another circle around it too that might represent a different cloud for a couple of different electrons, possibly, okay? Now, that will never go in between here. That they know. Isn't that strange? That's one weird thing about the science behind an atom. Okay, and they still today are trying to figure out, where does the electron go? They know it will go here, and it floats around it, and then they know it will show up here. They do have they're trying to figure out an electron speed, how fast it would go from one shell to the next. Okay, now there's a couple of other things they do know about electrons. They know that the electron, it carries a negative charge. Okay? So unlike the proton, which carries a positive charge,